Hi, so I know I've already made a video today, and that should be currently uploading. If not, it's not already uploaded, but I'm gonna make another video because something interesting happened. It's probably not that interesting, but I find it interesting. So I was sitting here earlier with my sister, and we were just like talking, and the news was on in the background, and I normally get really annoyed about the clock, but I couldn't hear it because I was focusing on different things. My attention wasn't drawn to it. And even when I started talking to my sister about the clock being annoying and how I hate it being in the background, I couldn't hear it for another like 10 seconds or something. I was really trying to focus, and my sister said, "Oh yeah, I hear it now." And I was just like listening, and I couldn't hear the tick. It wasn't there at all. And like, because my mind must have still been focused on the other information in the room which was being processed. That must have been where my focus was. And then eventually I started hearing the clock, and once I heard the clock I couldn't get out of my head, and I couldn't understand how I wasn't hearing it before. um that happens a lot. I find myself, I'll be sitting in the living room, and then my attention gets drawn to the clock, and I don't know why, but when it gets drawn to the clock I can't take it away from the clock. And I think it's because I tell myself, don't think about the clock, don't think about the clock. And the more I say that, it's like I just keep thinking about the clock, and it eventually annoys me, and I just end up taking it off the mantelpiece and putting it in the kitchen under a tea towel, and I've got a really big spot growing. Sad times being a teenager. But yeah, so I think it's interesting because we filter out reality all the time. We never perceive the totality of what's going on around us. We only perceive small portions of it, and we wouldn't be able to perceive everything that's going on because we wouldn't be able to process it all, and we wouldn't be able to function in daily life. So we block things out, and our mind does this. And I think it happens unconsciously. We don't necessarily say, okay, I'm going to block out the clock, I'm going to block out the birds tweeting, and I'm just going to focus on what's happening on the TV. It doesn't happen that way. It's like that same process, but it happens subconsciously. And I think for that reason, our minds are quite an amazing thing. Um, and also, I think you could probably take this idea further and say, well, what else? How else could we change our lives if we stopped focusing on things? And I don't necessarily just mean things in the tangible world, but things that go on in our minds. I think we have the potential to think and see the world in a lot of different ways, but we get stuck on certain ways of seeing the world, and we block out other ways. And because we're subconsciously blocking out perhaps more positive ways of seeing the world, it's actually hard for us to tap into seeing the world in that sort of way. So we have to practice and get ourselves used to seeing the world in a positive manner, and eventually it will just become normal, and our minds will subconsciously block out the negative things that happen in our lives, or the negative thoughts that we may have, and we'll just eventually, it'll become the norm for us that we'll see the world in a more positive manner. And I think there was a psychological study that can back this up, and I can't remember the exact colours of which were involved, but there's basically a team of basketball players. I think there's reds and blues. I'll use those two colours anyway. It says count how many red basketball players you see, and they're all interweaving out in and out of each other and passing the ball around. So it's quite difficult to keep track. So you really have to concentrate on the specific idea of counting how many red shirts you see. And then at the end of the video, it tells you to rewatch it, but look for the guy dressed as a monkey or an ape. I think it's a gorilla actually. Watch for the guy who's dressed as a gorilla, and it's so amazing because the first time round you don't notice the guy who's dressed as a gorilla just there in the middle, pounding his chest, like running around. You don't see that. You only see what you're looking for, and I think again we can apply this and say, well, what are we really looking for in the world? What are we really focusing our attention on? And is it conducive to us living a good life? Because there's always two sides to the story, and I would argue with life there's a lot more than that. There's probably an infinite number of ways in which you can perceive reality, and obviously some of those ways are better than others, and some are true and some are false, and some are perhaps somewhere in the middle. And I don't think it's necessarily clear as to which ones are true and which ones are false. But we can change the way in which we perceive the things that happen to us, and change the way in which we perceive the world, and it can actually change our experience of the world. And I think it comes with practice and things like that. And I think that's why meditation works. See, I used to do a lot of meditation. I got to a point where I was doing it for about 3 hours a day, just straight, and I could sit there, and it's because I practiced it a lot, along with um doing other things as well, which were conducive to living a spiritual life, or whatever you want to call it. I was doing other things as well, and it eventually just became easy, and it affected my life in such a positive way. Because with meditation, you're essentially just being an observer of your thoughts, being an observer of what's going on in your mind and your body, but you're not necessarily connecting to it or trying not to have judgments. And after you've done that for so long, maybe it could take days, it could take weeks, maybe months. You're eventually able to slip into this meditative state where you close your eyes and you're breathing, and it's you get into this a state of peace where you're just being an observer of what's happening in your body, and you don't really have to use any effort. You're just able to let go, and you feel like a buzzing in your head, and your body. You just feel like, I want to say connected to your body, but I'd say it's more of a disconnect from your body. It's like you're connecting to some sort of higher energy or higher power, and you just feel peaceful, and it has an impact on your life. And I think there's been studies as well done which suggest that meditation can actually help with things like depression, and I would say it definitely does. Especially if you commonly get caught up in negative thought patterns, maybe just about anything that happens in your life. Maybe you can't help but perceive it in a negative way, and that's essentially just getting caught up on a negative thought. So it's like you might have a negative thought, and then you capitalize on that negative thought, and you enter into this downward spiral. But with the skills that you learn through meditation, you just learn to observe the negative thought and just let it go, and it's as simple as that. Whereas if you don't practice meditation, which I haven't been doing as much recently, and I have noticed that I have been I'd say substantially more negative than when I did practice it on a regular basis, and I find that when I have a negative thought, it's very easy for me to get emotionally attached to what's happening in my mind, and it can be a detriment to my life and to the way that I am in the world. So I think I think I should probably try and get into a routine of doing it more often. And obviously, with things like meditation, you can do it anywhere. You don't. It doesn't have to necessarily be sitting in the lotus position, listening to some sort of um, Eastern music or binaural beats. You don't necessarily have to do that. You could go for a walk in nature and just like observe what's going on around you, and like watch thoughts pop into your mind, and watch your experience of exactly of the external world, and just see what's happening without getting attached to it. And so yeah, but I think the most beneficial form of meditation for me is probably I enjoy laying down because it hurts my back when I've been sat up too long. I like laying down, closing my eyes, and obviously it's best to do this when you're not too tired, otherwise you'll just end up falling asleep, and it's not really as beneficial if it happens that way. However, if you do it before you go to bed, you can still reach the states of hypnagogia, where you see the colours floating around your eyes, and then eventually you will drift off into sleep. And I think that can still be beneficial, and that's what I used to do a lot of the time as well. Um, but yeah, so, and I think when you practice that sort of meditation, it becomes a lot easier to be able to do meditation on a daily basis. Like, for example, if you're just walking around, or if you're partaking in artwork, or doing any sort of mundane activity or seemingly mundane activity, because I don't think activities are necessarily intrinsically mundane. I think that's a judgment we have on them. That's just a result of our perception. I think you can find meaning in basically anything you do if you have that mindset. So to that extent, it is subjective, but most experience is subjective anyway. So I think we have to utilize that piece of knowledge about our perceptions being subjective, and about our perspective of the world being subjective, and try to make the best of that. How can we possibly maximize our capacity for living a good life, based on changing our perspectives. And in order to change our perspectives, we have to change the way we think about things. And in order to do that, we have to focus more on the positive thoughts rather than focusing on the negative things, like the clock ticking, for example. I find that to be a negative part of my life on a daily basis whenever I focus on it. But yeah, it's just about, focus on the positive things. And you can say that that's naive because there is negative things going on in the world, and maybe we should still acknowledge the negative things that go on, but maybe not get so attached to them. But I don't feel completely comfortable saying that, because I think if negativity does arise, then maybe we have to deal with it. But I'm 19 years old. I can do that when I'm older. I can change the world later if I feel the need to do that. But right now, it's not really my problem. I've got things to do. I've got qualifications to get. I've got responsibilities as a 19-year-old. So I'll just try and make the best of it now, and then obviously focus on the bigger things, the macrocosmic scale of society in the future, if my life heads in that direction. And if not, then fine, that's alright also. But yeah, so see, I'm talking about this now and have this little thought in the back of my mind, oh, you won't actually do it. But is that one of the negative thoughts again coming back, and I'm just believing it? And maybe I believe it because I've practiced it so much. And I've actually got something upstairs wrote about this on my wall, because I used to watch a lot of hypnosis videos, and I found it profoundly interesting. Like, not just like, oh, that's cool, but like, wow, I'm actually really captivated by this, because it demonstrates this I guess the complexity and the power of the human mind, and how susceptible we are to influence from external sources like the media and other social influences like that. And yeah, so I think hypnosis is extremely interesting, and you can actually use hypnosis in the form of meditation, because you can do like sleep hypnosis, or hypnosis to quit smoking, or hypnosis to be more happy. And it basically sends, so you go into like a meditative type state, so you close your eyes, focus on your breathing, but then affirmations will be spoken to you through whatever audio it may be that you're listening to. Maybe it's some sort of mantra, or something like that. And but mantra is more like repeating. So, but it's like subconscious affirmations being whispered or spoken into your ears alongside this like calming music, and eventually you start to believe what these affirmations are saying. Because what we do is, on a daily basis, we listen to the little voice in the back of our head, and that becomes our mantra. That becomes what we believe, because it's thoughts that we practice on a daily basis. And we start to align with those thoughts until eventually we do adopt them as beliefs. And when we adopt something as a belief, we perceive it to be true. And when we perceive something to be true, it's very hard for that to be shaken off. And what if that truth is actually a falsehood in disguise, and it's just a belief that it's just a thought that we've been practicing until it's eventually become a belief. And that's definitely possible and probable. So if we can change the thoughts that we're thinking, then we can change the way that we're seeing the world, and that's good, because we have a degree of control over that. We can control the types of media that we put into our mind, and we can control the types of things that we're tuning into, and that can create our reality essentially. But again, we can only do this to a certain extent, because I think sometimes we get bombarded with different messages, whether that be from social media or old media such as the TV and the news, and it can, I guess, take over our mind. It's like a distraction almost from living a good life. It's like, and I feel like I'm talking like how I used to talk, but I did used to be happy to an extent in certain ways. But now obviously I've been focusing on my A levels a lot, and I think I've put this thing aside, and I haven't necessarily been completely happy recently because of some of the thoughts I've been having. And I think it's important to realise that we're not necessarily the thoughts we think, because the thoughts we think are probably just things that we've adopted from external sources. Maybe we've heard things on the media, like I don't know, negative messages, and then we eventually internalize these messages and they become a part of ourselves, and it's not conducive to living a fruitful life, if I could put it that way. So, yeah. And I won't go into the meanings of good and bad right now, because I think there is good and there is bad, and bad's like makes you depressed, and good makes you feel good. Good is good. Good is like yellow, not like a horse. We can't define it. Said Yimura. Yeah. And that's how I'm going to end off. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been helpful for anyone else who may be struggling a little bit with maybe, I don't know, some mental health issue like depression or anxiety. I hope it's helpful. Just, I mean, it's a bit cliche to say just think positive thoughts, but that's essentially the case, that's what you have to do. But I'm not an expert, so do your own research. Okay, thanks for watching.